The Creative Nonfiction Podcast is sponsored by Goucher College's Master of Fine Arts in Nonfiction. The Goucher MFA is a 2-year, low-residency program. Online classes let you learn from anywhere, while on-campus residencies allow you to hone your craft with accomplished mentors who have Pulitzer Prizes and best-selling books to their names. The program boasts a nationwide network of students, faculty, and alumni, which has published 140 books and counting. You'll get opportunities to meet literary agents and learn the ins and outs of the publishing journey. Visit goucher.edu/nonfiction to start your journey now. Take your writing to the next level and go from hopeful to published in Goucher's MFA program for nonfiction. Okay, let's do this, CNFers. It's about 4:30 in the morning my time, so I gotta keep this thing a little bit lower. Gotta dial it down a little bit. Did you know it is Dino-vember? Not die as in death, but dino as in dinosaurs. A dinosaur. Which is how and why today's guest is Sam Chiarelli. Dinophile Sam on Twitter. Author of the memoir Dig, a personal prehistoric journey, published by Hippocampus Books. Hey, what is up? It's the Creative Nonfiction Podcast, the show where I speak to badass writers, filmmakers, producers, and podcasters about the art and craft of telling true stories. I try and unpack their artist journey, as well as habits and routines so you can apply those tools of mastery to your own work. I'm at Brendan O'Mara and at CNFPod on Twitter. I'm Brendan O'Mara in real life. Sam's book is about chasing your curiosity and following your deepest passions, or refinding them again as if they got lost in the rock years and years ago. Maybe consider excavating what excited you as a child. That time when you did what you wanted for no other reason and you thought it was fun and cool. And speaking of that, I know I often get into the trap of not rereading as many books or rewatching as many movies because the act of revisiting something is a missed opportunity to try something new, to read another book or to see another movie, etc. But kids are unashamedly capable of watching a movie they love 50 times, often restarting the movie the second it ends. I think we need more of this as adults. So, I read The Great Gatsby every year, kind of around this time, actually. And I'll watch certain movies and documentaries several times with a pencil and notebook to see how the movie gets stitched together. Same with narrative radio and books for that matter. My point being, the great power of Sam's book allows you to surrender to those childlike whims without fear of embarrassment. Hey, guess what? Today's podcast is brought to you by Creative Nonfiction Magazine. For nearly 25 years, Creative Nonfiction has been fuel for nonfiction writers and storytellers, publishing a lively blend of exceptional long and short-form nonfiction narratives and interviews, as well as columns that examine the craft, style, trends, and ethics of writing true stories. In short, creative nonfiction is true stories well told. Oh, by the way, happy Thanksgiving and good luck out there on Black Friday if you're one of those folks. Thank you for coming along this CNFing journey. I'd be deeply grateful to you if you shared the podcast with your immediate circle. And if you're feeling extra generous, maybe a bit doped up on food, I don't know, writing a review over on the iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or whatever they're calling it these days. Okie doke. That is it. Let's get this thing rolling. Episode 127 with Sam Chiarelli. It's great in reading your book. I got the sense of how important dinosaurs are to you and how passionate you are for it. And so like early in the book, it's great how you refer to like the various stages of stage 1 dinophilia. And how did you come to that as a way to start sort of the gradations of dinosaur passions? And so how did you approach that?
I wanted to explain what every kid goes through because it's kind of like the chicken pox, like where everybody gets it for a little while, and then certain people get stuck with it for a little bit longer, and then certain people are lifetime. I mean, it never goes away. So I wanted to treat it like it was some sort of condition. And that's why the whole dinophilia stages came about. And it seemed like a funny way to explain something that is actually like really deep, but everybody, it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. So it gives you a way to talk about that and a reference point that everybody can understand and kind of place themselves somewhere on this spectrum. So a lot of people will come to me and be like, "Hey, I'm in stage 3," or "My son is in stage 2." So it's a lot of fun.
Nice. And of course, as growing up, you were, you got the dinosaur bug early. At what point did writing and stories sort of also inoculate you and get into your blood?
I think I was always interested in reading and in I think actually not as much classical literature that I ended up studying later, but more of the science, just so I could learn more about dinosaurs and learn about nature. So I was always thinking someday I'd love to write a book, but I never thought of myself as a writer. It took a very long time. And it was really after college where I started to think about possibly writing a book or doing something more with that writing bug. I was writing music, I was writing lyrics for a while. I did some music industry kind of stuff for a little bit. And so there was always that writing outlet, but it wasn't until sometime later that I started to take it more seriously. And one of the assignments I had, I did the Wilkes University's creative writing master's program. And one of the first assignments I had was something about writing about your childhood. And I started to write about going to museums to see dinosaurs with my parents. And for some reason, there were 3 parts to that assignment. So everybody got used to hearing about the dinosaurs. And then after that, I did something else. And everybody in my class said, "Where are the dinosaurs this week?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to just keep writing about dinosaurs. I mean, that's not why I'm here." And they're like, "No, you should keep doing it, though, because it's really good how you do it." Because I'm not coming from a scientific angle. I'm coming from a person who's just really passionate about this and can translate a lot of that science, which is there's a lot of it. So you have to keep up with it and then give it to people in a package they can understand. So that's how it started. And then after I had done a few of those, my mentor said, I think you should consider doing something with this." And I had never thought of it before, but 7 years later, here we are.
Right. And what was that moment like when you're starting to vet out creative writing programs and trying to take that leap and explore that or scratch that itch that was nagging at you? Like what was that transition or that moment like in that period of your life like?
Well, I had sort of an interesting path to that, I guess, because it's not really the way I've talked to other people who agonized about that decision. But for me, I went to Wilkes as an undergrad, and I had several friends who went from undergrad right into that program, and they were telling me how great it was. And I was doing music stuff. I was on the road. I was working on, in a band. So I thought, man, if I ever have time, I'm going to do that. And when that started to wind down, I knew I wanted to just get into that program. So I started writing a lot and reading a lot and getting, prepared, and I got accepted. So it wasn't like I had to vet a lot of different programs. It kind of was just it was a natural progression.
What were you studying in undergrad? Was it a music track?
Well, partially. So I majored in English literature,
Hmm.
and then I minored in music and in history. But I spent a lot of time in the library reading all the dinosaur books. So it was it was just kind of a little bit of everything. And I think in the book too, you'll see there's a lot of references to music. There's a lot of references to literature. There's stuff about Allosaurus being compared to Grendel and Beowulf and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So there's a lot of fun connections that I don't know if other people have explored in the same way.
You know, you write in the book too. There's a little passage I pulled out that, despite the occasional taunting, I spent my school years quietly. I tried to avoid social interaction whenever possible. While I was generally accepted by my classmates, I never felt like I belonged. And I wonder, like, where did that come from, and how did that foster an internal life for you at a young age?
Oh, that's a great question. I grew up on a street where there weren't any other kids at all, and I didn't really have any cousins or anything that were around my age. So I spent most of my childhood by myself, and just reading or thinking about dinosaurs or watching documentaries and all that. And so my friends were the dinosaurs. Like, to me, that's who I spent all my time with and who I was learning about. And that was the default setting for me. So yeah, I think growing up and even now, I mean, it's not I've it's awesome to be around people. I love sharing the passion for nature and dinosaurs and paleontology. But it's not something that necessarily comes easily from within to do that. So it's something I've had to work on.
And I think in the book that you said that your favorite dinosaur is a Stegosaurus, right?
Yeah, Stegosaurus and Deinonychus. That's my answer for favorite dinosaur.
Okay. What does someone's favorite dinosaur reveal about them, do you think?
That's another great question. I think it has something to do with either what attracts you to um, shapes, because dinosaurs have a lot of interesting um, features, right? They have horns, they have spikes, frills, plates, clubs, huge teeth and claws, sails. So they have all these wonderful crests. So they have all these wonderful attributes. So you might be drawn to something because of that. But I also think it's something about your personality. So Stegosaurus is kind of the speak softly and carry a spiked tail sort of guy.
Right.
So I think that was I think I like that. Sort of like, well, don't mess with with Stegosaurus.
Yeah, I bet most kids, of course, gravitate towards T-Rex, and probably after 1993 with Jurassic Park, Velociraptors. Was liking the Stegosaurus kind of a way of you in your late stage dinophilia to sort of push back against those kind of trends and try to find something a little different to like than what everyone else was liking at the time?
I think I'm kind of like that naturally. I tend to like in a movie, I'll like the supporting actors a lot, or those other characters more than the main characters. And I do think I have major respect for Tyrannosaurus Rex. It is a wonderful, incredible, terrifying animal, but it's just not my favorite. It's not the thing that gets me the most excited about dinosaurs. That's it.
He's one dimensional. He's a one note dinosaur.
Well, I don't know about that, but I think it's just it's very easy to like T-Rex. And I think, there's always a T-Rex chapter in all these dinosaur books. There's always a lot of, I saw a really funny tweet a while ago, and it was kind of like a T-Rex is like twice as big as half a T-Rex, like, because everything is always based on how big T-Rex is. That's like the unit of dinosaur understanding. So I think it's just like the hub of the wheel for a lot of people, and
The gateway
there's so much more
dinosaur.
out there. It's the gateway dinosaur, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot more out there than just T-Rex.
So what was it when you entered this program, this MFA program or graduate program for writing, and then you were writing true vignettes or memoir vignettes. What was it about writing in that genre that appealed to you?
There was something. Well, and I should mention, I thought I was going to do fiction at first,
Mm-hmm.
even though I had no idea what I was doing with fiction. I don't know. That was the idea. But I gravitated toward creative nonfiction because it was an outlet to connect with people about the things that I am passionate about and that I find really important. And that the wonder and love of the natural world, the appreciation and the awe for that is what I think is a really powerful tool to help us stay in touch with that childhood part of us that's just in awe of everything. And I think when we lose that, we, as we get older, a lot of people kind of lose that in the shuffle, and they lose the happiness and the excitement just to be alive and to keep learning about things. So I found that this was an outlet for me to do that, to talk to people about things they hadn't thought about since they were kids. Dinosaurs are not something that people talk about every day, but as soon as you get them going, they won't stop. And
Mm-hmm.
that was really amazing for me because I didn't expect that reaction, but it kept happening everywhere. I would have to do some sort of presentation or talk or pitch or something. People were going bonkers about this idea and had to be talked away from it because it's just something everybody's fascinated in. I've never heard anybody say, I hate dinosaurs. They're dumb.
Right.
It never happens. They're so interesting. So that's what drew me to it. And I know, other people use creative nonfiction for telling really powerful stories about their personal lives, or, they really have some deep things to talk about. And I think that's all really important and really something that as a culture we've benefited from and will continue to as more people share those voices. But I also think it's a way to talk about these things that will elevate us and lift us, especially in these really divided times that we're in now, to have some sort of curiosity and excitement about this huge continuum of life that we're all a part of. I think it's so important, and it's going to help as an antidote to this really, negative climate that we're in at the moment.
Why do you think there isn't the adherence to that childlike adherence to dinosaurs as kids get into their preteens and teens and then into young adulthood? Because you're saying people always want to hear about it. They're still so curious about it, and it does trigger the imagination in ways that no other animal can. So why do you think there is that fall off and a lack of adherence to a love of dinosaurs for most people?
I think there are several elements of growing up that are socially acceptable. So you can be a fanatic about sports and talk to anybody, grown-ups, kids, everybody's okay with that. And there are other things too that, everybody has a good reference point for, but I think people with really intense passions for things, dinosaurs, or I don't know, certain those interests that are just all consuming, people who collect things, or maybe artists, fill in the blank. Anybody who's listening, you'll know what it is, and you might be doing it now. But it's those things are harder to kind of wedge into an easy social structure that everybody understands. And so I think either people go, they sort of drift from it and try to fit in with the crowd more, or they double down on it and get ostracized from everybody else and just kind of like, oh yeah, they're kind of, odd or whatever. So I think I was trying to balance that and not do either one and just kind of keep it. For a while I did have sort of like dinosaurs were in the background and I wasn't really paying attention to them. And then I got back into them. That's the when I got into stage 3 and I realized I was missing something. I was missing this big part of who I was, and I wasn't going to lose it again. And that was right at the end of high school. So ever since then, I've been sounding the trumpet as often as possible. And I found, if there's any younger people listening to this, if you're really interested in something and people think you're kind of weird, keep doing it as much as you want, because what's going to happen is after a few years have gone by, everybody's going to think it's really cool that you have a passion in something. It's not going to be uncool. If it is uncool now, it won't be for very long.
Right. When you were pursuing your advanced degree in writing and then transitioning to really leaning into what would become Dig, did you experience any false starts and really those confusing moments where you really weren't quite sure what the shape of this thing was going to look like?
Oh boy, yes. So this book took 7 years to write, and the reason is because I had no clue how to put it together, and I don't think anyone else could really help in a substantial way with it. It was something that I had to do. And what I realized after a while was happening was that I had a lot of different puzzle pieces, and I was just shuffling them around. And so you have a really good section, but you could put it almost anywhere, and no place seemed like the right place to put it, because the book, as you know, is there are a lot of elements to it. There is certain reflections about childhood and more memoir segments. There's history in the book. There's science in the book. There's first person experiences in the book. And there's also sort of, more lyrical elements in it at certain points. So all those elements were just sort of floating around. And no matter what I did, I couldn't feel good about them. And what I realized after a while was that the thing to do was to use those first person elements as a spine for my skeleton. Mm-hmm. And those would connect the book together. And so the idea of making this pilgrimage out west, which I always wanted to do, became the focus and the through line of the book. And then everything else, the side trips and the going back and forth in time and bringing in interview segments and all this other stuff, really latched onto that spine and made the whole thing work and give it a drive and an energy that it didn't have before. So I'm really interested in the structure of things in writing and how they all go together and how you can make all that work in a seamless way that interests a reader without, losing any of that excitement or losing the elements that you want to have in there.
Yeah, I felt your train trip out west and that very kinetic element of you moving, and you and your friend Tim moving across the country to this dig site was elemental to the story, because then you could hang any of the other vignettes off of that spine, but you definitely needed some of that, like you were saying, that thrust to go through, because you could interchange a lot of the other scenes. And like, all right, you could have very well opened the book with your reflections on Jurassic Park, but instead you that's more in the second half of the book. So it's like you could have, I'm sure you were experimenting with that stuff, but that's a really great move, and that you were thinking that through, that you needed that sort of kinetic element to it. Yep,
absolutely. And the personal elements kind of came into it later too, because I was going deeper and deeper down the well, which is, I think, why the Jurassic Park section is towards the end, because you're just going down and down this rabbit hole of dinosaur fascination. And there was this sort of other story, which was over the years acquired this really terrible travel anxiety. And I didn't have it at all at one point, and then it got worse and worse and worse. And that sort of made its way into the book too. So to sort of overcome this so I could do this trip and be a part of it. So this project like saved my life. It really opened things up for me, and it became something more than just about the science. It became about me too. And that's hopefully, my hope for this is that other people are going to read this and they're going to want to dig into whatever it was that fascinated them and electrified them when they were younger, whether that's dinosaurs or something completely, stamp collecting or ballet dancing or whatever it is. I hope people really dig back into that stuff and kind of reconnect with who they are.
In what way did this book project save your life?
I think I was really, the anxiety thing, if I don't know, what your experiences with that are, if any. I hope you don't have any. But it was getting, it gets worse and worse as time goes by, and you just feel like you can't do certain things. I couldn't get on the highway at all. It was just driving me, it was really driving me crazy. And so I would go to, like, if I had to go to Philadelphia, like when I went to see the Dreadnoughtus, for example, I drove down there on these back roads. It took me like a whole day to make what would be a 2-hour drive from my house. It took like all day. I had to stay overnight with my cousins down there and take a train into the city because I couldn't drive. Like it was bad. So the train trip to go out west, because flying is out of the question. So the train became this thing where, the first fossil hunters, that's how they went out to the west. They took trains out there. And, I had been trying to get on a train or try to go out west, and I couldn't do it. I was getting defeated by this. So I knew if I was going to finish this book, which I'd been working on for years, so I didn't want to tell everybody I abandoned it. I had to go out there, and I wanted to go out there, and I had to go through, all the steps to get control of myself again. And it was a tough process, but it was the best. I mean, to get to do this was a dream come true, and it was great to actually have my life back. So now I can drive wherever you want me to, and I can, I can be the places I want to be. And, I think that's, the dinosaurs helped with that a lot. And my friend Tim, that was one of the great things about Tim being there, was that he's a very, very agreeable guy. He's really happy, and he's really friendly and really funny. And he just thought this was a cool idea to go, across country. He was going to take some pictures and just enjoy it. He had no demands. He didn't want to see anything. He's just like, I'll just come along for the ride. And it was good to have him there because I felt like I had somebody who was going to, if I did start getting really worried, he would be there. But we didn't really have any trouble at all.
And was there a particularly traumatic moment when you were younger that made it hard for you to travel and get in a car or a train, and certainly an airplane?
I think, well, I had a weird experience on an airplane where I was probably, probably around 12. And I was in an airplane. We had an air pocket kind of thing. And we fell a bit in the air, and no one else seemed to really care about this, but I wasn't happy at all because I'd never really liked heights to begin with. But I actually, it's kind of remotely dinosaur related. I went on a trip with an ex-girlfriend of mine and her parents out to Chicago, and we were driving through Ohio and Indiana, and it's just flat and there's just nothing to look at.
Yeah.
And I had actually hoped that we'd go to the Field Museum while we were out there. And just the way it happened, we weren't able to go, but just the monotony of just all those cornfields and just nobody was really talking on this trip. It was sort of alone with my thoughts, and it just, all this stuff, from inside you starts bubbling up. And I had this massive panic attack, and ever since then it got worse and worse. So yeah, it was I was still going places, but had to go the long way around.
I'll be sure to send you a link to my friend Scott Newmeyer, he's got a great podcast called The Anxiety Diaries.
Okay.
And it dives into his own anxieties and panic attacks and everything, but he also interviews a lot of really prominent writers and everyone involved in mental health. And
That's awesome.
It's a terrific podcast. I mean, I have my own hang-ups and everything, so listening to that is often like it's a really great show to realize that people that suffer from panic attacks or whatever, wherever you fall in an anxiety spectrum, that you're not alone. And it's really a tremendous resource, and he does amazing work with it, and it's very raw and vulnerable, and I think that's largely the appeal of it. So I'll be sure to send that along to you.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So what did writing this book, over the course of 7 years, what did it reveal to you? Like, what did you learn about yourself in the process of writing this book?
That's a deep question. I have to think about that for a second. I think I realized how much the dinosaurs were a part of my life. There's a segment early on in the book where I'm talking about like all of the dinosaur stuff I had, like just like the clothes and the decorations in my room, and everything I was doing was somehow dinosaur related. And I wrote dinosaurs were the glue that held my life together. And I didn't really think about that before. And I don't think I realized how much, you don't realize when you're a kid how much your parents sacrificed for you to do things.
Right.
Right. To go places, to get you the things that you're interested in, and take you to the museums and the bookstores and all that stuff. So that was there too. But I also kind of, one of the reasons I wrote this was because there were like a few reasons that everybody said were the key to dinosaur popularity. The original answer was they're big, they're scary, and they're extinct. And I thought, well, there are a lot of really big animals in the fossil record. There are a lot of really scary animals in the fossil record, and there are, 99.9% of everything is extinct. So I don't think that's the whole answer. And then other people said, well, there's dinosaurs allow for kids to explore these really scary things, but in a safe way because they can't get hurt. And I thought about all the nightmares I've had about dinosaurs, and I thought that can't be right either. There's no way that they're safe because they're terrorizing me in my imagination. So that part of the book was like trying to answer that question. And I have an answer that I don't think anybody has fully articulated to this extent before. I've not really seen this answer, but it really has to do with our imagination, and that we as humans have this capacity to wonder, and that's what really sets us apart from the other animals. Not tool making or language, but awe and wonder, like we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the key. I think the only way that we can see the non-avian dinosaurs is to imagine them. And that gives us, that's a primer for this really essential human characteristic that we have.
Right.
So.
Right. And given the breadth of time from when you started the book to when it ultimately published, a length of time of 7 years, what was the shape of that time like? How often did you put this book in the drawer and then just stepped away from it and said, I'll come back to you in a few months? Did that happen at all?
It happened a lot, but I don't know. It's all a blur. So when I finished, there are two kind of parts to the Wilkes program. There's the master's part, and then there's the MFA part. And I when I finished the master's part, I said, I got to kind of go away for a little bit. I got to figure out how to do this thing that I'm trying to do. And I was away for I guess like 3-4 years before I came back and finished the MFA when I was ready. Because I had to do the train trip. I knew that, and I wasn't ready at that point. But I also didn't know the shape stuff that we talked about earlier. So I would work on it really feverishly for a while, and then, like you said, put it in the drawer, not work on it, and try to recharge. So it was tough, and we all have these conversations about like writing projects and doing different things, but we all have our lives too, and sometimes life stuff comes up, or whatever, and it's really hard to work. So I think there was a lot. These 7 years have been like, it's awesome now that the book is out, but I feel like these have been really challenging years in a good way, like in a positive way, but there's been a lot of stuff. And I'm happy that everybody can go on this journey now, and something positive has come from it. But it was definitely, it was tough. Yeah.
And you, in the book, you also reference key mentors, and like what was it's a woman? Is her name Becky?
Becky Bradway.
Yeah. So how important and influential was she for you in as you were developing this book and just your becoming as a writer?
Becky was, she was the one who convinced me to write this. First of all, it was really her prompting. But she's amazing at putting pieces together and kind of knowing how to bring the best out of you when you're trying to do multiple things at one time in a piece of writing. So she was very important in terms of encouraging me that I could do it all along the way, because as you know, writers we can be very like temperamental.
Oh yeah.
And I think she was a very good cheerleader, but also like very reassuring. And then she was like, "Hey, I live in Denver. Come out here. I'll take you around. I'll go places with you." Because at this, after a few years, like she got into it too, So we got to go to a lot of places together out there, and she's in the book as well, and her husband. So that was really cool. We got to like do a lot of this journey together from start to finish. But I think if you're looking for a mentor and you're not in a writing program or something like that, you have to find someone that you have a similar working style with, so you understand each other and you sort of have the same literary inclinations, even if you don't, do exactly the same kind of stuff. So I think we both have similar working styles, and that really helps, know when to dive in and when to keep working and all that kind of stuff.
And in that time away from the writing of the book, what, if you can remember, what were you reading at the time too that, just kind of coached you along as books as mentors, as I like to say too? What were you reading that helped inform what would eventually become your final product?
Yeah, that's a great question. That was really the key spark of how to get out of the "I have too many puzzle pieces" conundrum. Was reading for like the MFA paper that I had to do, and some other just outside reading just to figure out how to do this. I started to read these nature and science books, which I'd always kind of liked, but I started to read them as a writer and to see how they were put together. And there are a lot of books coming out in the last few years where there's a person, either a scientist or just an enthusiast or a journalist, but somebody who's really passionate about a subject, a particular animal, or extinction, or any some sort of subject, but they're doing these first person explorations of it, and they have a sort of kaleidoscopic outlook. So they're talking to different people and interviewing them. They're going places. They have a lot of research elements in them. And I realized that I wanted to do that, and that no one had really done that for dinosaurs, which I wanted to read that book, and no one had written it. So that was, I seemed to be one of the people who had the strange set of skills to bring that to life. But there are great books about dinosaurs that aren't as personal, and so it was kind of like a way to address that in that new kind of way that people have been writing about so eloquently recently. So those books, I mean, if you want me, I can give you a huge list of books that are in this vein.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think some of the ones that are like really readily available, and that people may have read. I think H is for Hawk is in there. That's a really personal one. There are things like The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert, which are exactly what I'm talking about. Where there's one person on a quest. Mm-hmm. Tor Hanson's Feathers was a good one for this. James Prosek has a book about eels, which just blew my mind. I mean, it was like this. It's very scientific, and yet it gets spiritual. And I wasn't ready for it, and I was a little skeptical, but I was blown away. Helen Scales has written several books about marine biology, which are absolutely excellent. And again, with that sort of like, guiding you through the whole world under the sea. And I'm trying to think. Katie Fallon's Cerulean Blues is another one that was really important to me in terms of how you could write about yourself and also follow this nature thing, because in her, you're figuring, in the first chapter, okay, this book is going to be about songbirds and, how they're threatened by, habitat loss. And in the second chapter, there's like the Virginia Tech school shooting massacre, and she's involved in that. And so the whole book is her like going through this and trying to overcome it. And that was really eye-opening for me too. There are a lot of others, but those were definitely the ones that were forefront of my mind when I was putting this together and figuring out how to do it. So I think if you're writing anything, as you said, other books can be a really useful tool to help you figure out how to get out of the big problems you're having, because you might not find the answers to questions that no one else is asking online. So you might have to just kind of go into the things that you're naturally gravitating toward and see how they do it.
And when you were writing Dig and getting back into it after taking sort of a leave of absence from it, what was the shape of your days, and what was your routine around making sure you got the work done? When you were getting up in the morning, like when did you find the time and the energy around your life to get this done?
I had this terrible premonition earlier today that you were going to ask me this question, and I realized I have no good answer for it. I tend to work in really intense bursts, which I don't like saying, because I'd love to have a writing routine, and I'm hoping to do that in the future. Yeah. But it would kind of be, if I was working on something, it was always on my mind. I was writing while I was at work. I was writing like while I was, doing other things, and I would come home and just write a lot and work on stuff. And then when I wasn't writing, I wasn't writing. Like there were periods where I was just kind of letting it all simmer, because your mind's always working on it, So I was doing other things and stepping away from it. So I think it's been like a lot of really intense bursts. I mean, I know there are people who like they stay up all night and they write and all that stuff. I don't do that. Mm-hmm. And it'll be like when I'm consumed by it, that's all I'm working on. And then when I'm not, I'm not, not actively working.
And what's your day job? What do you do for your primarily your form of income?
Internet marketing. So okay. I'm the social media team lead at an internet marketing company here in Scranton, PA.
Mm-hmm. I like that too. I've been ever since I had Natalie Singer on a couple weeks ago. I've been wanting to dive into other people's day jobs too as part of this conversation. Because sometimes a lot of us, I think the vast majority of us have to have some sort of a day job that might not necessarily be let's just say our writing might not necessarily be supporting us in the way maybe our loftiest of dreams would be, but we have jobs, and then we make the art around that job. And I would like to kind of break that wall down, because I think there's a lot of shame feeling of shame involved when if you're a writer with some talent and you can't solely support yourself, that you feel like you've failed. And I'd like to dispel that. So it's great that you're in internet marketing. That's what's paying your bills and putting food on the table. But you're finding time to explore your artistic creativity with this kind of work. So I'm very glad that you're just sharing that with me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And how have you approached that? Like, you've got your hours and so forth. Like, how do you find the time to fold that into your life and to not feel, weighed down by any kind of inadequacy, because it's not like your sole gig writing?
I think it's a great question. I think people are very caught up with the writer's life, in quotations.
Right.
And I mean, that's awesome, right? Like, it's really cool. If you can do that. But I was never interested in it purely for that, like for the Instagram version of what a writer does.
That's a great term. Yeah, that's a great term.
I just wanted to share what I thought was valuable with other people. So honestly, we're talking about work. Like, I find a lot of value in working. I love my team. I love where I work. I have a great time there. I feel like we're doing good things. And so that actually lifts me up. I feel more positive that I have something like that that's stable. I don't have to worry about, like, if I don't make this deadline, I'm not going to eat or I'm not going to pay rent. So you have to make the compromise of balancing things out. Now, for me, it's not about being a writer. For other people, that is their whole mission in their life. That's what they're about. And that's great. That's just not the path that I'm on. So for me, it's more about, making those connections and helping people to be at their best. So it's really all about what you value, what you put your emphasis on, what really brings you joy. And if you want to do something, you'll make time for it. If you have to do it, you will. And I think, work is just another, it's another part of what you got to do. So yeah, I don't think nobody should feel inadequate if they have a job. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah, I think maybe the inadequacy comes from if you're an artist of any kind, and there's this, like you were saying, the Instagram version of it where it looks like, someone with a certain degree of talent, they're posting that blow dried version of themselves, and I'm comparing that to how ugly I feel day to day. And, they must be supporting themselves with their paintings or their writing, but they're not showing the grind of the day job that they might have to subsidize their art that maybe they hope will one day support them. So, you're comparing your ugly day to day to the highlight reel of everyone else. And sometimes it can really pull you down,
Yeah. And the only thing that matters here is the writing.
Yeah.
Not how it happened, right? Like, you're either going to enjoy a book or an essay or something that you read online. You're going to enjoy that or you're not. It doesn't matter how, how many cups of coffee went into it, or what exactly happened during the writing of it. That's really cool too. And that's an interesting topic, and it informs what comes out. But I don't think anybody is going to tell the difference between, whether I had hot chocolate in a dinosaur mug while I was reading something or not. I probably did, but it doesn't really, I don't think it really affects your experience of the work based on where it was written, how it was written, what happened. It's really the work itself and what it does in your mind.
Do you have or an experience an internal voice that is a voice of limiting belief? And if you do, like, what does that voice sound like, and how do you overcome that?
That's another like really deep question that I feel like I could talk about forever and try to, like, as we're talking about it, try to figure out what I'm talking about. I think I have struggled a lot with that in the past, where I would think this is lousy, this is terrible, I hate this. But I think I don't do that so much anymore. And I don't think it has anything to do with, it was before the book was published. So I think, obviously now it's people who are listening to this who want to be published are like, oh, sure, easy for him to say. But I don't think the publication is really validation for me. I think it's more about, it's an opportunity to connect with more people. So it's not saying you're good or bad, because it's all about, life is about the fit. Do you fit in with this thing, right? Like, is this a good fit for you? So you can get published in a place where you get no support and nothing happens to your book, and you could say you're published, but what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. Or, you could be the best writer and not have anything published, and you can't tell yourself that you're terrible because no one knows who you are yet. You just haven't found the right fit for you and your project.
Yeah.
So I don't think that, I think we creative types have a tendency to be extreme and be very negative on ourselves. And one of the best things to do in those situations is think about what you would tell someone else if they were saying what you were saying to you.
Right.
So if your friend came to you and said, I'm having such a hard time, I don't feel like my stuff is very good, and I'm tired of working on it, maybe I should do something else, you would say to them, no, hey, like, the next place you send it to might be the place, or the next breakthrough might happen tomorrow morning, so just sit down and work on it and it'll come. But we don't treat ourselves that way. So right. Treat yourself the way you would treat someone else that you really care about, and it'll get easier.
And the nature of this kind of work lends itself to being kind of lonely, and it is a solo pursuit in a lot of ways. So how do you fight off loneliness and self-doubt in those moments of loneliness?
I have a really weird relationship with loneliness because I like it. Mm-hmm. There aren't really any interruptions on your imagination, and you can just go wherever you want to go. Sort of Carl Sagan Spaceship of the Imagination stuff, I guess. But I also think, for creative nonfiction, at least, I won't speak for the fiction writers who have a very difficult proposition on their hands there. But for creative nonfiction writers, I think a lot of writing, especially the writing I do, is the opposite of solitary. There are a lot of people that made Dig happen. A lot. If you look at the acknowledgement section of the book, there are a lot of people in a lot of places that helped make this thing come to life.
Yeah.
So that's amazing to me in itself. That's a miracle that a lot of people will help you and spend time with you and give up a lot of energy and effort to help you with whatever you're researching, whatever you're writing. It doesn't have to be this kind of natural history stuff. So I don't think it's as solitary as we like to think of it in the main. But if you're talking about the actual sitting down and writing part, that can be very solitary unless you think about why you're doing it. What I hope if you read Dig, I hope that you feel like you're not alone reading it, that you're with me, and it's in your head, it's me and you and every dinosaur that's ever existed, and we're going to have a really fun, amazing adventure into the deep past and into, this amazing world of science and history. So you're not alone. And I think that's what books are. That's what you mentioned at other podcasts. Like,
Yep.
We're not alone.
In the last 5 years or so, what would you say you have improved the most? What about you has improved the most over the last 5 years with respect to your writing?
I think man, this is tough. I think I've gotten a lot better at knowing when something is strong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a consequence of 7 years of polishing. That's
It's
really
also a lot about of being comfortable writing a lot of very bad sentences and pages to start to learn what is good according to your taste, right?
Yes, there are hundreds of pages of this book that are gone.
Yeah.
And it would be the same sections rewritten from scratch every time. So yeah, not afraid to throw things away. Keep the idea. I wasn't throwing out concepts. I was throwing out versions of the way it was written.
Yeah.
So and then not being afraid to cut stuff and make it work. But I think just knowing how to make this, put the energy into the sentences. I think I'm better at that than I was. I'm not I don't feel like I'm naturally good at anything. So it always takes me a really long time of working on something to get a level of comfort with it. So that's why it takes a long time. But if you put the time in and you work, it'll happen.
In your experience in these bursts of writing that you're able to do, when you sit down to do that, what is your stamina for and your endurance for the writing, and how long can you sit there and churn on a given day?
Probably a few hours, but not all in one sitting.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be like really intense focus for a little while, and then I'll go in, have a snack, and then I'll come back and work a little bit more. But so it's very it's very concentrated work in bursts. And then on a larger level, it'll be like periods where I'm doing that really intense work. And I found that it would actually be a little while after I had done something. It wouldn't be immediately after. So like if I went to meet with someone, do an interview for the book, I wouldn't sit down the next day and work on it. I wouldn't be in the right mood. I had to process that for a little bit. And then, maybe a few weeks later, I'd make sure I had all the audio. I'd make sure I had everything recorded and my notes and everything. But I wouldn't work on it for a little while. And then by that point, I'd be ready to sort of grapple with it from the writing point of view.
And part of what's been kind of fun following Hippocampus's tweeting and marketing and promotion of your book as well as yours is that the curiosity plays a very strong thread through the story of the story. And so what is driving your curiosity now?
In terms of the dinosaur stuff or the book, or what do you mean exactly?
Yeah, I would say, you exercised and fed your creativity and your curiosity through your love of dinosaurs, and it comes through strongly in the writing. And I wonder, I guess the better question is, what is piquing your curiosity these days outside of dinosaurs?
Well, there's certainly a lot more paleontological projects that are in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I have enough life in me to tackle all of them. But I think if you're a curious person, and I think all of us are to an extent, and we either, we either lose that or it's, worked out of us somehow. But you're curious about everything. I mean, almost anything in the world is really fascinating if you dig a little deeper. How they make stuff or why certain things are as they are historically. I had a really interesting conversation with my mother yesterday about why breakfast, lunch, and dinner are called what they are. We had to look some stuff up.
Yeah.
So everything is really fascinating. And I think that's, if you can be really grateful when you wake up every morning that you can have the chance to learn new things and to be excited about the world and excited about doing good things while we're all here, then you want to be curious. You want to be interested in everything, because it's precious and it's amazing and it's a miracle we're here at all. So yeah, I don't think it's almost more, to me, it's like, what do I have to do to like calm that down?
Right.
Like
So you can focus.
Yeah, I gotta have, we're having a conversation now. I could very easily just talk to you about like how cool, Styracosaurus is for the next 45 minutes. No problem. You can't function that way though. Like, so it's really just like keeping it under control and using it in a positive way. That's the issue for me, not what makes you curious. But I think we're all like that. It's just about different things.
What struck me in the book too is when you talked to some fairly prominent paleontologists, that they actually weren't super passionate about dinosaurs the way you were, and that really was very surprising to you. How unmooring was that for you, that these people you admire for their science and their communication, like, didn't really share the same energy and passion for dinosaurs the way maybe you were hoping?
Yeah, that was surprising. You're right. Mark Norell was the first one, and I had this great line of questioning prepared for him. He said, one of the first things we said to each other was, he basically said, well, people think you're really passionate about dinosaurs, and I'm not. And I remember just sort of like feeling disintegrating emotions and I just like sank into his sofa and just thought, I don't know what is going to happen now, because not only do I not have a conversation plan in place, but I also am going to look like a freak to this eminent man.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to seem like an excited 5-year-old, even though that's what I am right now. And I want to try to, not be, I have to be an adult right now. So that was interesting. And then Paul Sereno, who's another huge name in the field, said the same thing to me. And they both had different reasons for loving dinosaurs. That's the other thing. There are so many elements of it. If you like dinosaurs, you get into not only natural history and biology and evolutionary biology and all that stuff, and paleontology, but geology and geography and chemistry, like all these other fields. So I think Mark Norell he just loves travel. I mean, if you talk to him for a little while, he just loves that. And Paul Sereno was more interested in like the adventure of it, like going out, going into these remote places and bringing back really wonderful specimens of something. But they're at the top of their game. I mean, they're not like, they don't like what they're doing. They love it. It's just they went into it for different reasons. And I've found out subsequently that a lot of paleontologists are more like me. I mean, they're just like, they're really, really obsessed with dinosaurs. And I think, Steve Bersati is one of those people.
For sure. Yeah.
So it's been interesting to talk to people about that and how they got interested and what their level of interest is. And I think maybe there's some benefit to not being super close to what you're studying. But then again, Nizar Ibrahim that I talked to for the book, he's like, he's really intense, and he was like that since he was a kid, and he said it helps him. It helps him to understand things, and so I think it's all, again, it's all fit. It's all how you fit into the how dinosaurs fit into your worldview and how you use that interest and that passion.
I can attest to that. Like, having been a sports writer, being a sports writer often kind of ruins sports for you. And I cover a lot of horse racing, and my first book, 6 Weeks in Saratoga, burned me out on horse racing for a few years. Like I couldn't even go near the sport for a while after that. So you can, too much of a good thing can fry you. It's, which kind of leads to my next question with you is like, I want to ask you why maybe you didn't become a paleontologist, given your passion for it, why you didn't pursue that.
Yeah, it's another good question that I had to wrestle with during the book, the whole book writing process. I have at least once a year, I go into this sort of funk about it. But I think there's a lot of really practical, boring reasons. One of them is that as much as I love science and I absolutely, yearn for all this knowledge, I was never big about doing experiments and actually like doing the science. And also I was never a great lover of math in school. And I never had a teacher who knew the extent of what the dinosaur thing was and said to me, you can do the math. You can do it. It's not impossible if you really want to follow this path. And I also think that's because I'm in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. We have rocks that are twice as old as the Jurassic dinosaurs. So we have a lot of ferns up here. We have a lot of really interesting, carboniferous fossils, but we don't have any dinosaurs. So if I had to do dinosaurs, I would have had to go out west or other places in the world. And when you're how old you are when you're trying to pick, what you're going to do in high school and college, that seemed like a really huge thing. So I was like, I don't know, and plus, like we said with, curiosity and passions, I have a lot of passions, not just dinosaurs. So I was interested in music. I was interested in, in literature and all these other things. So those seem to be easier to gravitate toward in this area. And that's what I did. But the dinosaur thing, came back with a vengeance. And I'm actually happy to fulfill this role now because I think a lot of the people I looked up to and still look up to are science communicators. And I don't think we have enough of them. Right. And if we do, they're getting drowned out. There's just a lot going on right now. Yeah. So I hope I can help with that. I hope, I can be a gateway for people to get into to nature and science a little bit that might not have found it through the existing conventional ways to do that. So even though I'm not a paleontologist, I feel like hopefully I'm going to contribute something to the conversation around that and help people get, reignited about it.
What really a moment that really surprised me in the book, and I guess it shouldn't have surprised me that much, but it really did, was the duration of a dig, that it can take 5 years, maybe even the case of was it Dreadnoughtosaurus or that
Dreadnoughtus, yep.
Dreadnoughtus, that it could take 10 years to carefully chip away the rock to get to the skeleton. That blew me away in a way that was like, oh yeah, you think you just get out the brushes and it's a couple weeks later there's your skeleton, but like it takes years. I couldn't believe that.
Yep, it's a really time consuming process depending on what you're dealing with, depending on what kind of rock the scientists and they're digging in. So in the case of Dreadnoughtus, which is this, it's one of the largest and most complete of these super massive titanosaurs from Argentina. It's not anywhere near the biggest. I think it's something like 60 tons, which is, doesn't sound like something that's small. It's the size of a 737, but it's in this really tough rock for them to dig in. So it took 5 years to get the bones out of the rock. And then another 5 years of preparation at 3 different museum labs to prepare those bones. And preparing them means cleaning the rock matrix from them using glues and other adhesives that are very special and won't destroy anything. to keep those bones together. What's amazing about dinosaur bones is they're really fragile. You wouldn't think they are. They survive for millions of years, but they're survived because they're encased in this rock. So yeah, then and these days there's also a lot of digital scanning going on and like recreating things and on computers and putting this stuff together for the public. In the old days, they used to like, take the bones out, drill holes through them, and put them on metal armatures to mount them for exhibit halls. But now, we're not as invasive and destructive about it. But yeah, it's a huge, really long process. And even, I was a paleontologist for a day. And it was a really long day in a place where we knew there would be something there. And you weren't guaranteed to find something, but you were in a really likely place and you knew what to look for. And it was still it was a long day. It was a great day, but it makes you appreciate these really long, arduous dig seasons, especially when you watch documentaries and there are months where whole expeditions of people find nothing. And they have no running water, no comforts of home, no great food, and they're finding nothing for weeks at a time in the middle of a desert. So it's like, man, I don't know if that's what I want to do with my life, but I'm glad there are people out there doing it.
Yeah, well, it's like with the Planet Earth nature documentaries, and if they're able to get 10 seconds of this beautiful bird of paradise doing a mating dance, like they might be out there in a week for a week or 2 weeks sitting in one spot in the rain or in the heat with their cameras waiting and waiting and waiting for 80 to 100 hours to get maybe 10 seconds of footage. But we just see that 10 seconds of footage and think, wow, what a job.
Exactly. So huge appreciation for that. And for David Attenborough, who's like my hero and is often the narrator of these shows.
Right.
So.
Well, awesome. Sam, out of respect for your time and your Sunday, I'll let you get out of here. Thank you so much for writing the book. Thanks for taking the time. It's a wonderful book. I hope a lot of people scarf it up. It definitely taps into your imagination and you do such a great job of inspiring awe in these creatures that lived millions of years ago. So, well done. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Brendan. It's been an awesome time. You're doing amazing work yourself, and I really appreciate you having me on and getting to talk about dig and dinosaurs. And hopefully we'll stay in touch. And for anybody who's listening in, follow along with what's going on.
Yeah. What's your Twitter handle so people can follow you if they want?
So all of my social media handles are the same. It's Dinophile Sam, DINOPHILESAM. And you can, if you can't remember that or it's too tough, go to samthedinosaurman.com and you can get all the links on there.
Fantastic. I love that. Everything right down to your email address just harkens to your passion for dinosaurs. I love it.
And it's easier than spelling my last name.
Yeah, no kidding. Is it Chiarelli? Is that how you pronounce it, or is it something different?
That is how you should pronounce it, but okay. No one, including my family, does. So we just say Chiarelli. But you're pronouncing it correctly. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, Sam. Thanks again for the time, and continued and best of success and best of luck with the book. It's a fun journey.
Thanks, Brendan. Thanks so much.
You got it. Take care.
You too.
Bye. Okay, not too shabby. That's count 'em, two dinosaur-themed podcasts this year. Steve Brasati being the first one for episode 117. You can dig it if you want. See what I did there? Before you bounce, maybe consider giving me a follow across the socials. Feel free to reach out with questions on craft, interviewing, etc. That's what I'm here for. At Brendan O'Mara or at CNFPod on the Twitter. Facebook is the Creative Nonfiction Podcast or at CNFPod host. Though with all this nasty stuff going down with Facebook, I might be getting rid of it. Might be getting rid of the whole shebang. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe you'd like to ask a certain question, have me ask a certain question of the guests. Maybe there's something you want to know from them, so you can have a greater authority when you approach your work. And, this podcast is really in service of you guys, the listener. So, yeah, maybe you'd like me to ask a certain question to the guests, like I wish you would ask them this. I'm definitely open to it. Also, if you dig the show, consider leaving an honest review on iTunes. They all help out. But more importantly, if the show meant anything to you, share it with just one friend and consider subscribing so we can keep the show on the air. I think that's it. Happy Thanksgiving. And remember, if you can't do, interview. See ya.